Our next guest is directing a different spotlight on the opportunities available to today's professional musician. Tim Page of the New York Times called Dr. Jill Timmons a sensitive musician. Her playing is graceful, lyrical, detailed, and intimate. Filmmaker Ken Burns selected music from her Amy Beach recording for his documentary on PBS called The War. In a career guidebook from Oxford University Press called The Musician's Journey, Crafting Your Career Vision and Plan, she offers what Scott McBride Smith called a wealth of practical strategies. Please join us in welcoming recording artist, educator, international consultant, and author, Dr. Jill Timmons. Dr. Timmons, thank you for talking with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Jill, you broke off a large piece in deciding to write a book about the life of the professional musician. What did you see as the problem or the need that required a title like this to be written?
Well, it emerged over a number of years. For about the past 15 years, I've worked as a consultant for performing artists, nonprofits, people emerging in the music profession. And what I discovered is that they often wrestled with one of two issues in wanting to create a thriving career for themselves. Either they were challenged by envisioning their path, their own gifts and talents, the dreams that they held, the things that most closely spoke to what they were passionate about, or they had difficulty making a concrete plan to realize those dreams. And while I found a number of resources in the publishing world for each of these two topics, I could not find a book that joined them. And so, in a sense, I wrote the book out of desperation, initially for my clients. I felt that it might be an excellent resource for people wanting to create that thriving career and to have an actual methodology around that.
In Scott McBride Smith's foreword, he said, "I was impressed with the wealth of practical strategies Timmons offers us." You saw a need for those strategies, and what were some of those?
Well, like any kind of process, there's a timeline, and first one thing, then another. And so one of the things that I brought forward in the book is that without a sense of who you are and what you're passionate about, any plan that you make is not going to be terribly effective. So one of the things that I hope the book encourages people to do is to have a way of finding what they want to do, some self-reflection, et cetera, and then a concrete plan to realize that. And the concrete plan includes everything from year-long timelines, a business plan, writing your mission statement, how to put together what I call your marketing starter kit, all of those kinds of very specific things that all artists must have in place. And frankly, as most of us know, most institutions of higher education, whether it's a university, a conservatory, or the like, don't cover this topic at the undergraduate education level.
When we're talking about the musician, is there a category or grouping or specific type of musician that this material covers?
Well, I like to think that this book can help anybody in the music profession, and that includes people that are wanting to enter the profession, perhaps at the college level, making those kinds of initial career plans. It can certainly include somebody who's already in the music profession and wants to make their career efforts more effective, perhaps thriving in a different way. It could also be for people who have been in the profession and want to make some kind of career shift. There's all sorts of advice for that as well. So although I'm a classically trained concert pianist, I have played a little jazz on the side, I like to think that this book really speaks to most everybody in the profession. And in fact, one of the chapters in the book, True Life Stories, I sought to have examples from all walks of life in the music profession: jazz, classical, composers, entrepreneurs, and people who represent different corners of our profession and what they're doing to thrive.
In your 40 years as a professional musician, give me the context of why you thought it necessary to title the chapter "The Accidental Entrepreneur."
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. People are always cooking up things, starting businesses, coming up with ideas, and my immediate family and extended family has this kind of view in the world of wanting to make things better and perhaps coming up with an idea that will help. So I had that modeled at a young age, and in fact, when I was in middle school, my sister and I opened up our own business, a gardening business. I've always been interested in doing things on my own and finding ways to connect with other people in collaborative ways. So I found myself in my late 30s realizing this on a kind of conscious level, that in fact, although I had a university job, my career was much larger than that. And that, in fact, if you talk to most musicians, a career is always a much bigger container. A career may have many different jobs throughout one's lifetime. And so from that standpoint, I realized almost accidentally that, I am indeed an entrepreneur, and I happen to have the following jobs. So that's why I entitled it The Accidental Entrepreneur, because I think there are many people out there who are working effectively as entrepreneurs, and once they realize that, they can really marshal those efforts.
You cite in the chapter entitled Preparing Today's Music Entrepreneurs that businesses employ just over half of the country's private sector workforce, and that they include 52% of all home-based businesses, and that they represent 97.3% of all identified exporters and producers. Produced 30.2% of the known export value in 2007. I thought the next sentence was interesting, where you said, it's clear that music professionals are now facing a culture and economic environment that favors the entrepreneur. Go a little further with that.
Well, the statistic that you're quoting I found in the Small Business Administration site, and I was just fascinated by that because in our culture, I think it's easy in the United States to kind of assume that we're being driven and influenced by corporate America in a very large way. But in fact, most of the businesses in this country are small businesses. And I like that idea because it's in keeping with this spirit of entrepreneurship, which I do think is particularly American. When we realize that so much of that is going on, and that we as musicians can be part of that culture, then it really behooves us to acquire the skills necessary to live that kind of entrepreneurial life. And as you probably know, there are a lot of things that support that. You have to be able to have some marketing skills. You have to have a business plan. You have to have a long-term plan. You have to have a number of professionals in your corner, an attorney, a CPA, a financial planner. You may not see them often, but you need to have them there as you make your plan.
With that plan, Jill, you and all entrepreneurs and musicians have to have a starting point. In the context of developing that plan, there's a gut-level desire and a vision that's required. Talk to me about a little bit about where someone starts to put that vision into action.
Well, that's a very thought-provoking question, and it really is the starting point. And often with my clients, and as well as nonprofits, I begin the conversation about this question: what would your perfect life be in 5 years? Create, define, tell me what that's about. Usually, if you pull people away from their shoulds and musts in their thinking, you access their more creative sense. And there's a wonderful question that Joe Dominguez asks in his groundbreaking book, Your Money or Your Life, one of my favorite books. And he says, Making a living and being an artist are not necessarily the same thing. And if you didn't have to make a living, what would you do? When you ask a person that question, if you didn't have to make a living, what would you do? Most people can immediately say, oh, I'd be doing thus and such. Well, there's your personal vision. And so this idea of making a living and being an artist, sometimes they intersect and sometimes they don't. Now, when I mention that to clients, sometimes they're somewhat horrified, thinking, oh, I'm going to be an artist and I'll never work in the industry. But I give a couple of really important examples. Philip Glass, for instance, drove cab till he was 40. We all know about Charles Ives working as an insurance executive and changing the course of American music. So sometimes you work in the profession, sometimes you work in tandem. The goal is to have that personal vision, because that drives your choices. That helps you find, as an entrepreneur, where the fit in the culture is for what it is you're passionate about. So once you have a sense of who you are and what you want to be doing, then, of course, the next thing is, where's the need? How am I going to fill the need in the culture? There's your work.
As a follow-up on that point, you cited the application of ancient Greeks and then the 9 muses in your chapter entitled "The Quest for a Vision." What constitutes a muse in 2014? Is it the same as a mentor, or would you look at it differently?
Oh, well, I really liked how the Greeks solved that, because there was this entity outside oneself that would help you in the creative act, and you would just simply have to connect with that muse. I think now, and that's my metaphor in the book, is that we have to, in a sense, connect with our own inner muse, if that doesn't sound too self-help. In our instant gratification culture and our quick answer, let's get to the point immediately, it's difficult, I think, for many people to quiet themselves. I often suggest to my clients to go away from their environment for a couple of days and not have any access to their cell phones, their computers, et cetera, and just have it quiet and listen to themselves in a sense. Sometimes I find that clients can access that inner muse through a kind of indirect way, and that is through a good reading list of things, what other people have to say about their own artistic journeys, what other authors have to say about the creative process, the nature of work, that sort of thing. And eventually we can come to some understanding ourselves. But it's not a direct, or I would say even easy process.
What becomes the largest stumbling block? You speak to fear in another chapter in the book, and the famous World War II reference from President Roosevelt, where we have nothing to fear but fear itself. How does that get in the way? Well,
it's kind of the elephant in the room. And I'll speak to that from 2 standpoints. Certainly, musicians function in a temporal art form, and in essence, there is no rehearsal for the concert. The concert is exactly what it is in that moment, and that's that. It's not like a painting where you can go up and fix something the next day that you didn't like. So, in a sense, artists are, if they're going to stay in the profession as musicians for very long, they're used to working without a net. They go into that concert, and it is what it is. So part of our field does deal with this topic of performance anxiety, and I'm not going to speak to that. That's kind of off topic, but there is some familiarity with speaking about fear. The fear I refer to is about a kind of self-limiting way of approaching your career. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. This idea in American culture, if you're an artist, you're going to be starving. We hear that all the time, and in fact, the data shows that that's simply not true. But that can be a very fearful statement. Don't major in music because you'll never get a job. Or don't become a musician. What are you going to do? Teach or perform, when in fact there are hundreds of varying career paths in the music profession. So those kinds of things can limit our vision, our choice, the things that we can create. It's a difficult thing. I talk about fear in the book from the standpoint that you can't really just say to yourself, okay, stop being afraid. In a sense, you have to put fear, as I describe in my book, on the back of the bus. It's back there. You don't really hear much from fear, and it doesn't influence you. It still, from time to time, shows up, but it doesn't direct your choice or your vision in terms of your own professional path.
There's a very well-worn line out of your book that reads, "There's plenty of work to be done in developing one's career. It is best done on ourselves." What were you meaning there?
Well, there are two ways of living, I think, and one of them is outer-directed and one of them is inner-directed. And you can imagine what direction I'm going with this. When we are directing ourselves based on the outer world, what other people are telling us we can and cannot do, what people are saying, I'm not talking about informed advice. I'm talking about information that simply doesn't have any grounding in truth, and often it's just negative. We lose sight of what is really our own inner genius, that part of us that is unique, that has gifts, talents, and in a sense, a mission. That's being inner-directed. The choices you make from being inner-directed are far more effective and powerful than listening to your outer commentary.
In the life of a musician, how does that usually manifest itself?
Well, I can give you a kind of vivid story that this may be the best way to describe it. Not unlike many of my clients, I had one in particular who came to me, and she had finished her undergraduate education. And as she was leaving, and this was a large state university with a music program, her major professor told her that she probably shouldn't have any considerations of having a music career because she didn't play well enough. Now, this was after 4 years of taking her tuition, and this example is also in my book. So she came to me really wanting to do something about her piano studies, but also kind of out of desperation because she felt, so confused about what she was going to do with this music degree and her deep passion for music. And so I basically, my approach was, well, I think that information from my standpoint, and I've heard you play, and I looked at your resume, et cetera, and I've heard your story, that doesn't really connect with who you are, and it's not correct information. So long story short, she got closer aligned with what she wanted to do, and over the course of several years, she continued her music study, made a plan to go to Paris, studied French women composers, had a performing career there for a while, returned to the United States, went on to graduate school, finished her doctorate in composition, and so now she is a professional musician working and thriving, and has just taken an academic post. She is, her music's been performed in New York. I'm not going to be too specific because you might find out who she is. But she went on, long story short, she went on to a spectacular career. And so if she had listened to that one exit interview with her professor, she wouldn't have gone further. So I think that, again, it's really being in touch with what gives you excitement, what gives you a sense of meaning, of personal joy, of all the markers that we know at the experiential and feeling level. We know when we're on the right track for something in life.
In the book, you wrote out 10 showstoppers. In there, you chronicle some of the things that professional musicians may hear or think or have had pass between them and accomplishing something. How did you come together with this list?
That list, it sort of, I distilled from years and years of my own experience as a performing artist, but also my clients, my students. And there are many more. I mean, we all have more on that list, but I came up with the 10, I guess, I would say, the most popular ones, the ones that I heard the most frequently, that are just simply not true, but they're still said by people. If I haven't made it by 30, forget it. That's a big popular one. And, of course, that's simply not true. I can give you lots of examples, the early one, Philip Glass in particular. The idea that I have to go to a certain school, I have to have a certain teacher, I have to win a certain competition. The idea that there are only two ways to work in the music industry, either performing or teaching. This is a very common one. I put those in from a lighthearted view, but also with the hope that people will read them and go, oh, gosh, I've said that to myself. I guess that isn't true.
Jill, thanks for joining us today to share a little bit of some of the wealth of information that's available in your book. We look forward to learning more and following some of the exciting information that you have available for us.
Well, thank you very much, Rodney, for this delightful conversation. It was my pleasure.
If you'd like to hear more of our conversation with Dr. Timmons, you can find it on the Classic Pianos website.